There is a kind of fear that doesn't come from a monster's roar, but from the sound of your own stomach growling in a winter night. You imagine yourself trapped in a snowbound forest, wind screaming through the black trunks, your food gone days ago. Out there in the dark, something is whispering your name, its voice like wind dragging itself along dry branches. It says, "You're hungry." You know there's a way to stay alive. When people are pushed to the edge of survival, the question is no longer how much goodness we have left, but how much time we have before hunger eats away our sanity. For Europeans, winter is tied to witches, vampires, wolves in the night. But for the nations who lived in the frozen forests around the Great Lakes and northern Canada, winter birthed another horror, a spirit of hunger that can slip inside an ordinary person and twist them into a monster. They call it by many names, but the most famous is a word as cold as the northern wind, Wendigo. The Wendigo is not the kind of monster that just jumps out of the dark, tears you apart, and disappears. It is far more terrifying because it is a question. If you were starving to the point of death, what would you be willing to do to stay alive? It is an effigy woven from cold, isolation, famine, and the obsession with cannibalism, the ultimate taboo in every civilization. People tell stories about the Wendigo, not just to scare children, but to remind the whole community that there is a line which, once crossed, means you can never be human again. In the legends of many Algonquian peoples, such as the Cree, Ojibwe, and Innu, the Wendigo was once a human being. It might have been a hunter, a father, a guide. They go into the deep forest in winter, when snow lies so thick it swallows every footprint, when the birds fall silent, and only the dense stillness of ice remains. They travel with their families, with their band, with the hope of bringing food back. Then a blizzard slams down, the way home is buried. Tents are shredded by the wind, the fire dies. In the first days, they share the last scraps of meat, then shoe leather, then anything they can chew. And eventually, one horrific option begins to hover in their minds: eating human flesh. The legend says that the very moment a person sinks their teeth into the flesh of another human, the Wendigo awakens. It doesn't need to charge in from the forest outside. It flares up inside the chest like a black flame. That person's skin begins to dry and tighten. Their eyes sink deep, ribs push against the surface. Their body grows abnormally tall, as if stretched out by hunger itself. They become skin and bone, yet their craving grows with every bite they swallow. The human form twists and distorts until all that remains is a desiccated, towering body with unnaturally long limbs and claws black as charred wood. That is when the Wendigo is complete. Indigenous people describe the Wendigo as a creature that always looks on the verge of starving to death. Its skin is stretched tight over bone, sometimes split open like a shirt too small for the body inside. Its eyes are sunken, yellowed, like embers dying in a cold hearth. Its mouth is wider than that of any human, teeth jagged and sharp like broken ice. Some versions of the legend give it the head of an animal's skull, crowned with deer or elk antlers, or with a withered rack of horns, making it look like a fusion of a corpse and a forest spirit. But whatever the details, one thing never changes. The Wendigo is always emaciated, as if its very body exists, to prove that this hunger can never be filled. That hunger lives not only in the body, but in the mind. The Wendigo is obsessed with eating human flesh, to such an extent that everything else in existence becomes meaningless. It can sense people from far away, not by the smell of blood, but by the scent of fear and exhaustion. They say that if you wander through a snowy forest and suddenly feel a sadness for no reason, a despair you cannot explain, it may be a sign the Wendigo is near. It doesn't just want to eat you. It wants to erode your spirit first. to make you understand that you are utterly alone and hopeless, and only then does it move in. The Wendigo does not charge like a wolf or roar like a bear. It is quieter than that. Some tales say it moves over snow without a sound. Even though its body is so tall, it has to tilt its head to slip past the branches. Other stories claim it can mimic the voices of your loved ones, calling your name in the night, luring you out of shelter and deeper into the forest. And there are stories more frightening still, where the Wendigo does nothing at all. It just stands there, at the edge of your vision, between the trees, unmoving, staring, letting its shadow press down on your mind until you go mad on your own. What makes the Wendigo especially terrifying is that it carries human memories. It remembers who it used to be, who it loved, who it swore to protect. And those memories torment it to the point of madness. In some versions of the legend, each time the Wendigo eats a person, it grows taller, larger, heavier, but the hunger inside it multiplies as well. The more it consumes, the hungrier it becomes. Looking at the Wendigo is like looking at a loop with no exit. The more it feeds its instincts, the more those instincts devour it. In the spiritual world of the Algonquian peoples, the Wendigo is not just a standalone monster, but a malignant spirit that can possess humans. It is the embodiment of bottomless greed, of placing one's own survival above every value of the community. A band survives harsh winters because everyone shares every scrap of food, every spark of fire, every breath of warmth. The first person to break that rule, to kill and eat a fellow human instead of dying together, is the doorway through which the Wendigo enters. Because of that, in stories told around the campfire, the Wendigo is both a demon and a warning. Children are taught that if they are selfish, if they hide food for themselves, if they think only of their own stomach while forgetting the people around them, they are feeding a little Wendigo inside. Adults are reminded that in years of poor hunting and in long expeditions, what keeps them human is not just a living body, but the ability to say no to the worst temptation. In a sense, the Wendigo marks the boundary between a person and a people. An individual can be weak, afraid, hungry, but a people can only exist if there are things no one is allowed to do. The legend of the Wendigo hasn't stood still over time. When Europeans came to North America and wrote down what they heard, the story of the Wendigo gained new layers. Some documents describe Wendigo psychosis, a kind of mental disorder in which a person believes they are possessed by this spirit, believes they are turning into a flesh-eating monster, and becomes so obsessed with that idea that they act on it. Scattered cases in history where someone living under extreme, isolated conditions committed horrific acts were explained as the Wendigo took hold of them. Even though modern scholars argue about whether Wendigo psychosis should be considered a distinct illness, one thing matters more. Indigenous people don't see it as just a fairy tale. For them, the Wendigo is the language their community uses to talk about things no one wants to look at directly. Despair, famine, collective trauma, and the consequences when humans are cornered by a merciless environment. When you live in a place where a single failed winter can wipe out an entire village, you need an image terrifying enough to keep everyone clinging to common rules. The Wendigo does exactly that. If you look closely, the Wendigo is a very weather-based monster. It is born from winter, exists in winter, and speaks the language of cold. The wind shrieking through the pine forests, the snap of branches breaking under ice, the way night falls while it still feels like afternoon. All of that is its stage. In that bone-deep chill, people huddle around a fire, a tiny circle of yellow light standing against the endless darkness beyond. The Wendigo lives in that narrow space in between the fragile warmth of embers and the absolute cold of ancient woods. It is the feeling when you realize that if the fire dies, what waits outside is not just weather, but an entire world that does not want you to live. Because of that, The Wendigo is not like a cheap jump scare monster. It touches something much deeper in the human mind, the fear of a hunger that is never satisfied. Hunger is not only a lack of food, it can be a lack of safety, of love, of justice, of boundaries. A person with power who doesn't know when to stop. A system that only knows how to expand without caring about the fallout. A society that always wants more, faster, richer. Under the eyes of many indigenous people, those things are also forms of Wendigo spirit. They watched caravans of traders, resource exploiters, people arriving from across the ocean, bringing with them a new kind of hunger. A hunger for land, for gold, for pelts, for control. So there is another way to read it. The Wendigo is not just the fear of cannibals, but the fear of humans turning into monsters through greed. The hunger of the stomach is only the shell. The real hunger is limitless craving. In oral stories, people sometimes speak of powerful, wealthy, ruthless individuals as if there is a Wendigo gnawing inside them, urging them to take more and more, no matter who pays the price. That monster doesn't have to live in a snowy forest. It can sit in a grand house, walk on paved streets, and still be starving in another sense, starving in compassion. As we step into the modern era, the Wendigo becomes rich material for horror. From short stories and novels to films, games, and comics, it appears in countless forms. Sometimes it is a towering creature with a deer's skull for a head and blazing eyes, striding toward the camera to a dark forest. Sometimes it's an invisible entity, leaving only giant footprints in the snow and whispers in the protagonist's mind. Sometimes, most frightening of all, it never shows itself clearly at all, existing only as the slow mental collapse of a person trapped in isolation and obsession. Each creator takes a piece of the original legend, reshapes and adds to it, but most of them keep the core intact. The Wendigo is human hunger turned against humanity. Modern depictions of the Wendigo in pop culture are usually designed to hit you with a strong visual. A body as tall as a tree, ribs jutting under gray skin, hands with fingers as long as dead branches, a deer skull for a head with two glowing red eyes deep in empty sockets. The setting is almost always snowy forests, remote wooden cabins, endless frozen roads. But if you listen closely to the older stories, you realize the Wendigo is not just a snow-level boss built for jump scares. It is always tied to human tragedy. A family lost in the wild, a starving village forced to choose between dying together or betraying one another, a person who can't resist the call of instinct and loses their soul. From a psychological angle, the Wendigo touches a question that makes everyone uncomfortable. If I were in that situation, what would I do? It's easy to confidently say, I would never, when you're sitting in a warm house with a full fridge. But stories of planes crashing in snowy mountains, ships wrecked on deserted coasts, expeditions trapped in ice show that humans can do things they would never imagine under normal circumstances. The Wendigo legend is like a warped mirror held up to us, forcing us to look at the worst possibilities inside ourselves. At the same time, it raises another question, deeper still. What limits keep us human, even in the worst circumstances? Communities living in harsh conditions have to think about this constantly. Laws, rituals, myths, they are not only there to explain the world, but to hold order inside the group. When someone crosses the line, they don't just harm their victim. They shatter an invisible pact that lets everyone survive. To blame that act on the Wendigo is a way of saying, once you step to the other side, you can never come back. You are no longer one of us. You are something else. Perhaps that is why the Wendigo still haunts modern people. We no longer live in snowy forests, no longer fear starving to death every day. But other hungers are everywhere. Hunger for money, for status, for attention, for validation. The winters of our age are no longer made of snow, but of loneliness, stress, social pressure, and the endless race to succeed. People are willing to trample others, lie, exploit, destroy the environment, sacrifice their own health, just to get a little more. Viewed that way, the modern world is not short on Wendigos, even if they wear suits, use smartphones, and sit in glass towers. The Wendigo legend reminds us that any hunger left without limits can turn into a monster. Hunger itself is not evil. It is a reminder that we need to live, to move forward, to improve our lives. But when it no longer knows what enough is, when it stops recognizing the people around us as people and turns everything into food for us to exploit, then we are walking the same path as those who once got lost in the snowy forests. What we lose may not be someone else's body, but trust, affection, the environment, the future of our own children. From a distance, it is easy to judge the figures in these legends. Why didn't they choose an honorable death instead of a shameful life? But these stories were created so that listeners would never have to face that kind of choice. The ancestors of the Algonquian peoples used the image of the Wendigo to nail one idea into collective memory. Never let the community be pushed to a point where hunger can shred every moral boundary. They remind each other to stock up before winter, to share when times are lean, not to abandon the weak, not to leave anyone alone against the storm. In other words, the best way to prevent a Wendigo from being born is to make sure no one is left behind. And at some point, we realize the Wendigo is not just a story that begins with once upon a time in the snowy forests of North America, there was a monster. It is a question aimed directly at our own era, when society constantly pushes us to want more, faster, stronger. When advertising, social media, and the pressure to compare ourselves keep inflating the list of things we must have, what exactly are we feeding inside ourselves? Is it healthy drive or a bottomless craving? Is it determination or an obsession that makes us blind to everyone else? The image of a lanky creature, skinny as a skeleton, wandering through a snowy forest and devouring anyone it catches is frightening enough. But more terrifying is the thought that it used to be human. It wasn't born a monster. It became one by letting hunger lead it too far. If the Wendigo is a distorted mirror of humanity, then its story is a reminder that every day, through very small choices, we are taking one more step either toward the warm fire of community, or toward the freezing dark woods where the wind sounds like someone laughing in our heads. On a winter night, if you hear the wind slipping through the cracks in your door, don't rush to imagine a monster standing out in the trees. Think instead about the hungers whispering inside you. Hunger for success, for possessions, for being above others. Every time we let them decide for us, we give them another scrap of our body, another piece of our soul. At some point, we may still wear a human face, but others will look at us and see only the stretched features, empty eyes, and never-closing mouth of the Wendigo. And maybe that is the real reason this legend has survived so long. The monster in the forest can be beheaded, burned, sealed away, but the monster inside has only one cure: to notice it, to call it by its true name, and to learn how to say, enough. Otherwise, with every winter that passes over humanity, whether of snow or of the spirit, we will find ourselves asking, in the end, is the Wendigo just a story? Or is it the shadow quietly stretching out beneath everyone's feet?